Deep beneath Solomon's temple, 9 knights found a forbidden secret, not gold, but a divine code that could reshape the world. This is the story of the hidden empire they built with that knowledge, and the real reason they were erased from history. Despite the official narrative that the Templars found nothing, they came back from Jerusalem completely transformed, possessing great wealth and a sudden, inexplicable immunity. Could they have unearthed ancient scrolls that laid out a holy bloodline, or maybe they found a gateway protected by symbols that only they could decipher? What secret was hidden behind the sealed stone entrance below the Temple of Solomon, and for what reason did the Church go to such lengths to conceal it? Welcome to Mythic Index, a sanctuary for lost legends and forgotten timelines. Here, we peel back the layers of history to reveal the myths that shaped our world, from the whispers of ancient stone to the mysteries of the cosmos. If you wish to ensure you can always find your way back to this archive, please subscribe now. The Templars arrived in Jerusalem without an army, any significant treasure, or prestigious titles to their names. In just a few short years, however, they were granted access to the city's most sacred location, directly over the ruins of Solomon's temple, a privilege denied to others who prayed and fought in the streets. Requesting to live on the Temple Mount itself, underneath the structure locals called the Dome of the Rock, they publicly stated their mission was to guard Christian pilgrims. Their true work, however, took place underground. At night, subtle tremors shook the ground as stones were moved and tools were lowered by rope into cavities that had been sealed for ages. Their primary mission was not warfare, it was an excavation. Soon after, strange rumors started to surface. These whispers described a subterranean door, crafted not from wood or iron but from polished stone, bearing a strange carving and having no keyhole. It raises the question, why would an order of knights who had taken a vow of poverty spend years digging beneath a holy shrine if they didn't believe something of immense value was buried there? Some early Arabic historical records speak of the Frange asterisk, or foreign knights, who worked in silence beneath the mount, carefully avoiding any public notice. They were reportedly seen studying maps, inquiring about old tunnel systems, and poring over ancient texts that other Western soldiers ignored. According to local stories, these knights uncovered a collapsed staircase which led down into a corridor thick with dust and silence. At the very end of this passage, they discovered what seemed to be a sealed chamber, its entryway marked with a 7-sided star and a series of lines that no one could properly interpret. Is it possible the Templars had located an intact vault that predated the temple ruins themselves? Many believe they breached it in secret, removing artifacts that were never documented or seen again. According to Holy Scriptures, the Temple of Solomon was built using divine measurements and once housed the Ark of the Covenant. If a hidden room from that era had survived, its contents could have been anything from scrolls and relics to something far more powerful. A number of theorists propose that the Templars discovered ancient texts left behind by priests who had escaped the Babylonian siege. These documents might have contained not just ritualistic instructions, but actual blueprints explaining how to manipulate light, sound, and sacred geometry. The question remains whether the Templars deciphered these codes themselves, or if they transported them back to the West to be translated in secret. From the Templars' 9-year stay in Jerusalem, no official documents exist. There is nothing to explain what they discovered, who they might have met, or what they took with them. Yet upon their return to Europe, their entire fortune changed. The Templars ascended from total obscurity to become one of the most powerful organizations in all of Christendom. Popes granted them special privileges, kings gave them vast tracts of land, and they were made immune to most secular laws. How could such a small band of knights achieve such a rapid rise to prominence, unless they returned with something far more valuable than battlefield experience? Could their astonishing new power have originated from a discovery buried for centuries beneath Solomon's temple? Accounts from later centuries describe a black tablet brought from the east and concealed within a Templar priory in France. This tablet was said to be inscribed with symbols from a language unspoken since the time of Babel. One of these symbols was a star enclosed within a circle, another was a downward-pointing arch of fire. These very same designs later appeared in the stained glass windows of Templar chapels and were integrated into the floor plans of cathedrals. Could these grand structures themselves be architectural blueprints, physical echoes of what was unearthed below the Temple Mount? Scholars have long argued whether the Templars' fascination with Solomon's temple was literal or merely symbolic. But when you see their rituals, symbols, and architecture all transform after their time in Jerusalem, the emerging pattern is difficult to dismiss. What sort of chamber would demand such absolute secrecy? And what kind of knowledge could be so threatening that it had to be encoded in stone rather than written on paper? Some believe the vault beneath the temple was designed not merely for concealment, but as a containment cell, a chamber sealed to imprison concepts that could dismantle the authority of both monarchs and popes. Before we drift deep into the ancient past, take a second to tap the like button. Think of it as lighting a candle in this digital hall, helping other weary travelers find their way to these stories. According to local tales, the knight who spearheaded the excavation was rendered permanently silent upon opening the mysterious door, eventually taking a vow of silence in a monastery that he kept until his death. Another of their number is said to have vanished during the sea journey back to Europe, last seen clutching a scroll bound in dark fabric. Following this sighting, both the man and his precious cargo were lost to history. Could these disappearances explain the complete absence of records? Perhaps the knight's secrecy was born not from an oath, but from a profound terror of what they had brought to light. Modern ground-penetrating scans of the Temple Mount have detected unmapped voids deep below. While some could be natural formations, others display the unmistakable hallmarks of human construction: unnervingly straight walls, perfectly sharp corners, and impossibly level floors. However, due to the intense political and religious sensitivities of the site, no permission for further excavation has ever been granted. So, whatever they discovered remains locked away, buried beneath layers of stone and centuries of silence. And yet, their symbols keep surfacing on ancient tombs, within illuminated manuscripts, and carved into forgotten chapel walls, as if the memory itself refuses to be buried. What if the door they breached opened not into a physical room, but into a revolutionary idea, a forbidden truth that could rewrite the history of royalty, religion, and humanity itself? Why else would countless later organizations, from the Freemasons to the Rosicrucians, all claim a direct lineage back to the Templars' time in Jerusalem? Was it simply a compelling myth, or a genuine secret being passed down through generations, hidden right before our eyes? The full story was never committed to paper, yet its influence casts a long shadow over the centuries. For the better part of a decade, this small band of 9 knights occupied Jerusalem's most sacred ground, and their true purpose remained an enigma. They claimed to be impoverished, yet their actions were precise and deliberate. They gave no sermons, raised no churches, and sought no new recruits. As the rest of the Crusader states were consumed by war and territorial disputes, these 9 men stayed focused, their attention fixed entirely on the ground beneath their feet. Locals observed them descending into the ancient ruins with tools, parchments, and peculiar instruments. The nights around their quarters were reportedly filled with the rhythmic sound of pickaxes hitting rock and the murmur of hushed voices speaking languages that even the area's priests couldn't identify. What discovery could possibly hold them underground for nearly 10 years? What kind of mission demands such total secrecy that they would turn away their fellow crusaders? A compelling theory suggests these men weren't merely excavating, they were acting as guardians, and the object of their protection may have defined the very destiny of the Templar Order. The official chronicles of the era offer little insight, giving the knights only a passing mention. This very lack of detail is suspicious. How could a military order operate for so long without any recorded victories or visible achievements? History teaches us that such strange silences often conceal something that has been deliberately buried. The few surviving accounts describe heavily restricted access to their quarters and clandestine movements beneath the dome of the rock after dark. Village folklore speaks of one knight emerging from the tunnels, pale and unblinking, unable to speak for days. Another tale describes a man seen meticulously washing a scroll case in a nearby spring before vanishing completely by morning. While these might just be stories, their persistence for centuries gives them weight. Some theorists propose the Knights unearthed blueprints etched into the foundation stones, maps not of land, but of sacred geometry, with patterns aligning to constellations. An alternative theory suggests they stumbled upon a concealed archive, filled with texts that would upend official history. Could these texts have described Solomon's true knowledge of construction and alchemy? Or perhaps they revealed a lineage the Church could never allow to surface. The explosive growth of the order immediately following these years only deepens the mystery. The moment they left Jerusalem, new knights flooded in, lands poured in, accompanied by church blessings that other monastic orders spent lifetimes trying to achieve. As we begin to unravel these lost timelines, leave a comment with the name of the ancient civilization that fascinates you the most. Let's see which era calls to us tonight. But a baffling silence was maintained by all 9 of the original founders about what prompted this change. They put no holy relics on display, declared no miracles, and presented no ancient scrolls. Their refusal to speak was absolute. A compelling theory proposes they were bound by an oath to protect something far more ideological than physical. Perhaps they had encountered a text or an idea so potent that it needed complete containment, fearing it could unravel the very fabric of the faith they had vowed to uphold. Does this explain the peculiar clauses in their official rule, which emphasized secrecy, silence, and the protection of a mysterious light? Were these simply poetic spiritual terms, or were they clever code for something too dangerous to name outright? Subsequent texts even hint that a division formed within the original 9. A document unearthed in a priory near Toulouse, for instance, tells the story of one brother who journeyed east, carrying the weight of a discovery he was never supposed to possess. While his name is forgotten, the story claims his mission was to transport a scroll sealed in a bronze case far beyond the reach of both the monarchy and the church. So, was his goal to save something the others were afraid of? Or was this a calculated move in a larger strategy to place this knowledge into secret custody? Some historians have noted strange commonalities in the design and decor of early Gothic cathedrals throughout Europe. They point to symbols etched below altars, intricate labyrinths embedded in the floors, and numerical patterns directly linked to Solomon's temple. Is it possible the original 9 knights translated their discovery into the language of architecture, scattering it across the continent as geometric shapes that would endure long after scrolls and stories turned to dust? A peculiar detail adds to the mystery. The historical records don't account for all 9 founders. As the order grew, public documents only mentioned 7 of them in official capacities. One was rumored to have died in Jerusalem, though his grave has never been located. The 9th founder simply vanishes from every known historical text. Theories speculate he was a guardian who stayed behind, tasked with watching over something that couldn't be relocated. Others whisper that illness, or a vow of silence, claimed him. Could it be that this lost knight was the keeper of the final, crucial piece of a puzzle that was never intended to be solved? Even now, academics argue about whether the first Templars actually discovered anything. Yet the pattern is undeniable: 9 years of obscurity, followed by an immediate and inexplicable rise to power. That transition is simply too abrupt to dismiss. So did they find a physical object, a lost text, or a hidden history etched in stone? Or was their discovery a truth so ancient and so volatile that they concluded it must be kept from the world forever? The greatest power, after all, isn't always in what you say, but in understanding what must be kept silent. Long before political tensions and modern technology made excavation impossible, legends claim the Temple Mount was built over a subterranean complex, one far more elaborate than the temple on the surface. Texts from Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all hinted at a bizarre geometry hidden below the stone platform, a forgotten network of vaults, tunnels, and chambers. However, no one attempted to decipher these whispers until the Templars came to Jerusalem. And when they began to dig, it wasn't a random search. They excavated with a clear objective, seemingly guided by an unseen blueprint that only they could comprehend. Is it conceivable that a hidden blueprint, perhaps scattered or encoded within holy scriptures, directed the Templars to precise locations beneath the Temple Mount? The Mishnah, a foundational Jewish text, mentions underground structures that temple priests used to access hidden ritual rooms, which were sealed off by enormous stone slabs and connected by hallways built to holy specifications. Likewise, early Islamic accounts of the Haram al-Sharif refer to buried stone walkways, familiar to the prophets but concealed from everyone else. One text even detailed a spiral staircase descending to a gate that had remained sealed since King Solomon's era. So why was this information so carefully preserved for centuries? Was it all just spiritual symbolism, or were these literal clues to a hidden architecture? When the Crusaders reached the Holy Land, these accounts had largely become folklore, yet fragments of the original design continued to circulate among the region's scholars, mystics, and builders. Ancient Hebrew scrolls contained cubit-by-cubit measurements for rooms no one had ever laid eyes on. At the same time, Arab historians noted odd acoustic changes beneath the bedrock, hinting at the presence of hollow spaces. Some of these records even pointed to bizarre alignments between points on the ground and stars in the sky, suggesting the temple's very foundations were linked to the cosmos. Could this mean the temple was something more than just a place of worship? Was it an intricate machine designed to mirror a divine order? If that were true, then the blueprint the Templars found would be worth more than any holy artifact. 19th-century British surveys, particularly the explorations of Warren's Shaft and later mapping efforts, physically confirmed that man-made chambers and carved tunnels existed deep beneath the surface. While some were charted, none were ever completely investigated. The patterns they revealed showed incredible precision, perfect symmetry, and a clear mathematical design. What's even stranger is that these layouts perfectly align with what early Masonic plans referred to as the Double Temple, a sacred, mirrored building, with one half visible and the other half underground. Both sections were believed to possess equal spiritual importance. In Masonic lore, which claims to inherit Templar secrets, this concept is considered a literal architectural reality, not a symbolic story. Is it possible the Templars were the ones who first uncovered this two-tiered temple design? Multiple diagrams found in recovered Templar documents feature the same recurring geometric forms. We see a square contained within a circle, a pair of pillars flanking the arc of a compass, and spirals etched into the margins of stone. These designs look like more than just religious icons. They bear a striking resemblance to technical glyphs used in engineering, almost like architectural plans. This brings us back to those strange architectural plans. What if they were much more than just blueprints for a building? Many researchers who have studied these symbols are convinced they are actually encrypted instructions. The theory is that if someone could crack this code, they would unlock the secret to recreating the temple's unique harmonic structure anywhere on Earth. This possibility offers a stunning explanation for why, after the Templars returned from the Holy Land, Gothic cathedrals suddenly started appearing with geometric principles that had never been seen in Europe before. But the clues don't stop there. Ancient scriptures, like the Book of Kings, describe side chambers deep beneath the temple that were carved straight from the bedrock for storage and study. It's believed these rooms weren't just randomly placed. They were built using divine ratios, specifically designed to channel sound and create resonance. You have to wonder why an ancient civilization would be so concerned with acoustics. Today, modern physics teaches us that specific architectural shapes can naturally amplify frequencies. Is it possible the temple's original builders understood this and engineered it directly into the foundation stones? This idea, that Solomon's temple was a massive resonance chamber capable of influencing human consciousness, has fascinated many researchers. Finding a blueprint detailing these functions would certainly explain the Templars' obsessive secrecy. This wasn't just a Templar theory either. Islamic tradition speaks of a powerful force below the Temple Mount, with tales of the Well of Souls, a deep cavity said to carry the echoing voices of old prophets. While some dismiss this as metaphor, others insist it's a real place beneath the foundation stone where acoustics behave in strange and unnatural ways. A fragmented Templar journal from the 1200s even makes a cryptic reference to a deep place where the voice bends and memory stirs. This could be just poetic language, or it might be an attempt to describe a bizarre acoustic phenomenon the knights simply couldn't understand. Were they exploring chambers that vibrated with sound in a way that felt truly mystical, an experience that might have later inspired their famous tradition of ritual silence? When they returned to Europe, they brought this knowledge with them. Early Templar churches began to showcase architectural elements unheard of before their expedition, like intricate floor labyrinths, 12-pointed rose windows, and underground crypts precisely aligned to specific sunrise angles. Remarkably, these exact features mirror concepts found in ancient temple descriptions from Middle Eastern manuscripts and rabbinic commentaries. It raises the question: were the Templars embedding the temple's sacred design into European cathedrals, preserving the knowledge in stone so it could never be lost? While the Church never officially confirmed any of this, its profound silence on the matter might just be the most telling response of all. Think about it: if the Templars had returned with physical relics, those artifacts would have been put on grand display. Instead, they brought back two things: silence and a revolutionary new style of architecture. That silence may have been a shield, protecting something far more valuable than any object. Perhaps the true treasure wasn't a map to gold, but a sacred blueprint of proportions, alignments, and harmonies, a guide designed to elevate humanity to a higher state of being. All we have left are the echoes of this knowledge, whispered across scrolls and carved into the walls of chapels, buried under centuries of war. The Temple Mount's surface tells one story, but deep in the earth, another story was waiting, one the Templars may have found, memorized, and carried back west, hiding it in plain sight, arch by arch. This leads to the heart of the mystery. When the Knights Templar descended into the earth beneath Jerusalem, they weren't just looking for lost gold. They were hunting for something far more ancient. Legends whisper that they found it, a chamber that had been sealed since the time of King Solomon himself, its air perfectly still and its contents untouched for millennia. Inside, however, was not the kind of treasure you'd expect. Instead of jewels, the chamber is said to have contained scrolls, dozens of them, wrapped in fragile leather and organized with the meticulous precision of a holy archive. These were not copies of familiar scriptures or any laws recognized by the Church. They were far more ancient, perhaps even written before the first books of the Bible were ever conceived. Had the knights stumbled upon the lost works of Solomon's most secret scribes, or maybe even the records of a priesthood that came long before him? The implications are staggering. Ancient texts from Jewish, Islamic, and Eastern Christian sources all make subtle references to sacred writings stored in deep, hidden places. The Talmud speaks of texts sealed in stone niches beneath the temple, and some later scholars speculated these were the records of a forgotten priesthood, keepers of sacred knowledge about language, measurement, and spiritual laws that had been deliberately erased from history. One legend even claims Solomon himself, fearing this knowledge would be misused, ordered his scribes to write it all in code and bury it deep within the foundations. Corroborating this, Arabic chroniclers writing during the Ayyubid dynasty recorded seeing Frankish knights moving strange cylindrical containers under the cover of darkness. One account even described them carrying books that burned no fire, yet lit the eye. While these reports are vague, they appear in multiple sources, all seemingly describing the same mysterious event, the moment the Templars may have recovered a library of forgotten wisdom. After all, the greatest threat to an empire isn't an army, but an idea, and the Templars had just found a chamber full of them. Perhaps the Templars weren't just guarding ancient knowledge or forgotten relics. Maybe they were protecting a royal secret. Among all the theories surrounding the Knights, the most explosive is the belief that their discovery beneath the Temple Mount wasn't treasure or lost rituals, but evidence of a sacred lineage. According to this idea, Some of the hidden scrolls contain detailed genealogies tracing a direct family line from King David through Solomon and arriving at a name far too dangerous to utter in medieval Europe. This name was Jesus, but the scrolls allegedly presented him not as a divine myth, but as a mortal man whose bloodline had been secretly preserved. If this were true, the discovery would do more than just shatter the Church's entire narrative. It would challenge the legitimacy of every monarch in Europe who claimed to rule by divine right. Could this have been the ultimate secret the Templars were willing to die to protect? And if the bloodline was real, where did it go after the order was systematically destroyed? The concept of a living lineage descending from sacred kings is not a new one. However, the possibility that the Templars possessed physical proof, actual parchments, lists of names, and family trees copied from ancient records gives this particular theory unprecedented weight. Certain medieval texts even allude to a legacy sealed in veins, found within a hidden chamber beneath Solomon's temple. What if the scrolls were not just holy writings, but documented evidence of an unbroken lineage, intended to remain secret until the perfect moment in history? After all, the Templars returned from Jerusalem with much more than just stories. They introduced strange architectural designs, employed secret codes, and enjoyed an unexplainable and rapid rise to power. Their most private rituals made references to the vine of the house of David and a root unseen by kings. These were not simply poetic phrases. Many researchers now believe they were carefully veiled references to a bloodline the Templars had sworn to protect. Carrying the weight of this monumental secret, the men who arrived back in Europe were completely transformed. The poor, humble pilgrims who had departed years earlier with nothing more than their vows and rusted swords were gone. In their place stood a silent, powerful, and seemingly untouchable force, radiating a strange kind of immunity. They returned not just with wealth, but with immense influence. The gates of nobility swung open for them, popes granted them extraordinary privileges, and even watchful kings seemed unwilling to interfere with their operations. This meteoric rise prompts a critical question. In an age where the slightest hint of independence from the Church was punishable by fire, how did the Templars achieve such power? Many believe the answer lies in what they brought back from beneath the Temple Mount. This wasn't merely gold or holy relics, it was something intangible that could not be weighed or taxed. It was leverage, powerful knowledge, and perhaps even a threat, all masterfully disguised as religious devotion. This could be why the Templars moved with the confidence of men holding a secret no one could challenge, giving them access to corridors of power no other order had ever walked. Their incredible transformation began quietly, but within just a few short years of their return from Jerusalem, the order received sweeping endorsements from the papacy. They were granted the unprecedented freedom to travel across any border, collect their own tithes, build their own chapels, and, crucially, answer to no authority other than the Pope himself. Knowledge grows when it is shared. If you know a fellow seeker, or just someone who needs a peaceful escape into the past, feel free to share this video with them. But this begs a massive question. Why would the Vatican, an institution famous for hoarding power, ever sign off on such a deal? Many historians suspect the Church's hand was forced. The Templars had unearthed something in Jerusalem so potent that it couldn't be dismissed. Whether it was hard evidence of a different Christian history, ancient texts predating the Bible, or some form of esoteric knowledge that dismantled core Church doctrines, the result was the same. Confrontation was too risky. Cooperation became the only viable strategy. So was this arrangement a sign of protection or a clever attempt at containment? Almost overnight, their fortune began to swell at a bewildering pace. An explosion of wealth followed them as donations of land flooded in from all corners. Their network of estates soon stretched from France and England all the way to Spain and beyond. Ordinary pilgrims entrusted them with their life savings, while powerful merchants began using their network as a proto-banking system. Even kings became their debtors, a position that quickly turned from convenience to fear. Yet, how did this order inspire such immense faith so quickly? They offered no sermons, published no manifestos, and gave no public explanations for their actions. Instead of preaching, they built. A web of fortresses, commanderies, and proctories emerged, all laid out in patterns of striking geometric precision. A theory persists that the very placement of these buildings was a code, creating a sacred grid that mirrored cosmic patterns they allegedly found under the Temple Mount. This suggests their land acquisitions were not just strategic, but perhaps an act of recreation, mapping something ancient onto the European landscape. Take the peculiar commandery of Louverture in southern France. It stands in an isolated region with no obvious threats, yet it contains complex underground vaults, hidden wells, and stones etched with strange symbols. Records from the nearby Abbey of St. Gilles add to the intrigue, mentioning mysterious visitors arriving from the east and nighttime processions carrying sealed bundles. Could France have become the new repository for relics or texts deemed too dangerous to remain in the unstable Holy Land? The Templars also cultivated relationships with local nobles who subscribed to unconventional spiritual beliefs, forming connections with families linked to Catholicism, various Gnostic sects, and other Christian traditions the Church had suppressed. These weren't merely political moves, they were alliances rooted in shared ideology. A common visual language started to appear, with symbols like the cross pate, the twin pillars, and the eight-pointed star showing up in both Templar and Cathar sites. Were they gathering allies who already grasped the significance of their Jerusalem discovery? Even their naval activities became shrouded in mystery. From the port city of La Rochelle, Templar ships would sail west into the Atlantic, offering no public reason for their journey. Some argue these were simple supply missions, but a more tantalizing theory suggests these ships carried people, crucial documents, or even descendants of a sacred bloodline. With the Holy Land becoming increasingly unsafe, moving these secrets to a place nobody would even think to look might have been the ultimate plan. Back in France, their internal ceremonies also transformed. Initiation rites became intensely private affairs, steeped in coded phrases and ambiguous oaths. One chronicler noted a Templar motto, "He who speaks breaks the line." Was this ceremonial flair, or was it the framework for a chain of knowledge, meticulously designed to withstand persecution? Did every new recruit get one piece of a giant puzzle, which, when fully assembled, would unveil the complete truth? Financially, they operated on a whole other level. Their power wasn't in chests of gold, but in ledgers, promises, and an unshakable system of trust, making their wealth both fluid and nearly invisible. This made them indispensable, but it also made them a profound threat. What if their role was more than banking? What if they were guardians of a truth that could spiritually bankrupt the Church, not a loss of money, but a total collapse of faith? If they possessed proof that undermined the Church's authority, their continued silence was its own form of powerful leverage. And yet, for all their power, they rarely tried to conquer or convert. Their primary activities were to build, to protect, and to wait. This profound silence became their defining characteristic. Perhaps the Templars came back to France not to announce their discovery, but to hide it, not to trigger a revolution, but to prepare for a future one. Through all this secrecy, one truth emerged: they had been fundamentally changed. These men were no longer just soldiers. They had become something else entirely. Guardians, perhaps, weighed down by a burden that simultaneously made them invincible and dangerously exposed. Because whatever secret they carried out of Jerusalem made them untouchable, right up until the day it painted a target on their backs. Their silence was a formidable shield, but eventually, the world's most powerful men would demand to know what they were hiding. In the span of a single generation, this tiny band of knights had evolved into one of Europe's mightiest forces, and nobody could really articulate how. The Templars were no longer defined by the sword. They had become master architects, landowners, global traders, and most critically, the continent's bankers. While other holy orders devoted themselves to prayer, the Templars were methodically weaving a web of influence that penetrated every layer of European life. Their commanderies were far more than simple chapels. They were fortified economic hubs, deliberately placed along major trade routes, near ports, and at the heart of political power. Their financial records soon held more weight than those of many royal courts, and this entire empire materialized with such quiet efficiency that few recognized they were witnessing its creation. Were the Templars simply accumulating wealth, or were they executing a master plan, one conceived beneath Jerusalem and rolled out in plain sight across an entire continent? Unlike every other major organization, they had no public mission statement, yet their every action screamed of precise coordination across nations and cultures. This coordinated effort may have extended far beyond finance and politics, manifesting in the very stone of Europe's new cathedrals. In the century following the Templars' return from Jerusalem, magnificent churches began to stretch toward the sky, bending light in new ways and whispering secrets through their architecture. This revolutionary Gothic style, defined by its soaring pointed arches, delicate flying buttresses, and intricate ribbed vaults, seemed to manifest almost overnight. The sheer speed of this architectural leap, and the precise, repeating patterns it followed, has long baffled historians. While most scholars trace the style's emergence to France, some researchers point to a much deeper origin: Jerusalem. The theory posits that the true inspiration for these great cathedrals was discovered in a hidden chamber under Solomon's temple, a chamber filled not with treasure, but with sacred plans. This was geometry of a kind not taught in any monastery, a knowledge supposedly inherited from a past so ancient it has no name. After all, the Templars dedicated years to their work beneath the Temple Mount. Were they simply studying relics, or was their true find a master blueprint, drawn with divine proportion, aligned with the stars, and written into the very bones of the earth? This concept is known as sacred geometry, the belief that certain shapes, ratios, and angles possess more than just aesthetic value. They hold intrinsic meaning, vibration, and power. Consequently, the cathedrals that rose in the wake of the Templars' return were seen as more than mere buildings. They were sophisticated instruments, with every part aligned to channel light and every space acoustically tuned to amplify sound. The uniformity is what raises questions. Why did so many of these churches share the same layout, mirror star constellations, mark solstice points, and integrate the golden ratio into their design? What if this was a signal that the architects were drawing from a well of knowledge far more ancient than Christianity itself? In great cathedrals like Chartres, Amiens, and Reims, stonemasons began carving symbols that nobody could logically explain. Intricate labyrinths, once walked for meditation, suddenly appeared on the floors. Rosette windows, filled with a breathtaking geometric precision, adorned the walls. Mysteriously, some of these exact designs matched ancient patterns discovered in the ruins of the Middle East. Were the builders covertly embedding messages recovered from the Templar scrolls? And if they were, what profound secrets did those messages contain? The soaring vaults inside these cathedrals did much more than just support the roofs. They were engineered to guide force, sound, and even spiritual energy. They transformed enormous empty spaces into powerful resonance chambers, focusing energy in ways that modern science is only now beginning to comprehend. Pilgrims who walked through their doors often reported overwhelming feelings of serenity, mental clarity, or a sudden spiritual awakening. Could this architecture have been a technology designed to transform the human mind, not just inspire the eye? Some researchers now believe the Templars didn't return from the Holy Land with gold, but with wisdom, a complete system for measuring and shaping space that had been hidden beneath the Temple Mount since the era of King Solomon. If the original builders of Solomon's temple were referencing even older sources from civilizations like Egypt or Sumer, then the Templars may have single-handedly reopened a forgotten channel of knowledge that once promised to connect the heavens and the earth. But why would the Church permit such a radical evolution in design? Official records do show that some bishops resisted the new style, dismissing it as foreign, untrustworthy, and potentially dangerous. Despite this opposition, the cathedrals continued to rise, and the question of their funding provides a critical clue. The money often came from the very same nobles with direct ties to the Templars, men of land and titles who all developed a sudden and intense interest in advanced stonework and ancient symbolism. In many regions, the construction was managed by secretive organizations known as compagnon guilds, which operated with their own strange rituals, unique tools, and a symbolic alphabet that would later appear in Freemasonry. Is it possible these guilds were secretly founded by the Templars to quietly carry out their architectural mission long after the order was officially dismantled? The West Rose window at Chartres is a perfect example of this mystery. Its gorgeous pattern is also a precise map of the planet Venus's 8-year movement, a celestial cycle well known to ancient astronomers but supposedly forgotten by the medieval church. Why embed this in a Christian sanctuary? Was it a silent tribute to a cosmology that predated the Bible, or simply the signature of those who knew where the real knowledge came from? Even stranger is the fact that many of these cathedrals were built directly over older pagan holy sites, as if the land itself had been pre-selected centuries before. These locations frequently intersect with what are known as ley lines, supposed paths of terrestrial energy. Did the Templars possess a deep understanding of this energy, reviving a lost science of location, material, and form? Another theory suggests the vaults and arches weren't just for structural support, but were designed to mirror the heavens. By aligning their cathedrals with celestial points, the Templars may have been trying to create maps of the cosmos on Earth, reflecting divine order in a human-made structure. Could these buildings have been training grounds not for simple prayer, but for a higher preparation? Each cathedral an initiation chamber where knowledge was transmitted through light, sound, and shape. The builders rarely left their names. Instead, their often hidden carvings contain riddles, strange faces, and unique marks that seem playful at first. Yet when these symbols are mapped across different cathedrals, they begin to form distinct patterns. Could this be a language that only the initiated were meant to read? The final key, some argue, lies in the geometry itself. The Vesica Piscis, the flower of life, and the golden spiral all appear again and again, hidden in plain sight. These were not random decorations. They were chosen, passed down, and protected. Perhaps the Templars viewed themselves not just as guardians of relics, but as guardians of form, entrusted with a mission to reshape the world without ever explaining why. Their magnificent buildings outlived their order, and their symbols outlasted their forced silence. Through every pointed arch and vaulted ceiling, a single idea still lingers. That someone, long ago, left behind a set of instructions, and someone else, centuries later, decided to build them into stone. Even after their swords were sheathed and their banners taken down, the Templars continued to speak, just not in words. They spoke through symbols, circles carved into stone, keys etched beside altars, and stars placed high on ceilings where only the most observant would ever notice. To the average person, they were just decorations. But to those who had seen what lay beneath Jerusalem, these markings were a living language, a quiet script used to share maps, rituals, and truths far too dangerous to speak aloud. As the order's power grew, so did the appearance of these signs across Europe. Some were burned into wood, others chiseled into cathedral walls. A few were hidden beneath floor tiles or drawn on the last page of a ledger, but always small and always placed with incredible care. Why did the Templars begin using these strange images with such consistency across different countries and continents? Could they have been elements of a much larger code, one that only their highest-ranking members were taught to decipher? Among the most common was the 8-pointed star, sometimes designed as a compass rose, other times floating alone. This symbol doesn't just appear in Templar sites, it is also found in ancient Mesopotamian and Egyptian ruins. This raises the final, tantalizing question: what connection could possibly exist between the star of the goddess Inanna and the mysterious designs of the Knights Templar? Perhaps the answer lies not in any single symbol, but in the ultimate prize they were all pointing towards. When we think of the Holy Grail, most of us picture a radiant, golden chalice, the kind you'd find secreted away in a hidden cave. The earliest tales, however, paint a very different picture. They speak not of a physical cup, but of a conceptual one, a container for something far more profound than any liquid. This vessel was said to hold not blood or wine, but the very essence of truth itself. For the Templars, After their long years of excavation under Solomon's temple, this concept of the Grail as pure information would have resonated deeply. To them, the Grail was likely not a relic to be found, but a legacy to be protected. This inheritance was not an object but something alive, a lineage of people, a sacred bloodline, a reality so earth-shattering that its survival depended on being disguised as a myth. The oldest Grail romances, particularly those that emerged while the Templars were at their peak, describe something organic and transferable. It was a treasure passed down through generations, guarded by a select group of initiates. In some accounts, this Grail was depicted as a celestial stone that crashed to earth. Other versions refer to it as a luminous book of knowledge, or, most intriguingly, as a genealogical line extending back to ancient royalty and prophets. This brings us to one of the most explosive theories surrounding the order, that the Templars unearthed evidence of a sacred lineage in Jerusalem. This was a bloodline that could be traced back to the house of David, and according to some, may have even included the descendants of Jesus Christ. A discovery of this magnitude would have been catastrophic for the Church, as it would completely undermine its claims to power and its entire foundation of spiritual authority. Is it just a coincidence that the first Grail romances appeared precisely when the Templars were becoming a major European power? It's possible these popular tales of chivalrous knights searching for a holy relic were actually clever allegories, a secret history written in code to keep this forbidden information safe. If the Knights Templar were indeed the guardians of this secret, it raises a critical question. Who was the threat they were shielding it from? Was it the very church they swore to serve? It turns out that a rise in power is rarely a silent affair. By the 13th century, a growing sense of unease was spreading through the church. Once seen as devoted defenders of Christianity, the Templars were now perceived as increasingly self-governing, intensely private, and possessing a level of influence that no one could have predicted. Their reach extended across the known world, their treasuries were as full as those of monarchs, and ultimate authority rested not with the Pope, but exclusively with their own Grand Master. Rumors began to circulate in Rome, suggesting the knights were concealing a great secret. It was said that behind their oaths of humility and devotion, the Templars were pursuing a hidden objective, one entirely invisible to the Vatican. The initial alarms were sounded discreetly, through cautiously phrased letters from high-ranking church officials who had seen troubling signs during their visits to Templar fortresses. These correspondences described peculiar ceremonies, inaccessible chambers, and iconography that was completely alien to established church teachings. For instance, an archbishop from southern France detailed a chapel whose altar was oriented toward the south instead of the traditional east, adorned only with the carvings of a key and a snake. A different report warned of chants being recited in tongues that were unrecognizable to any attending clergy. The question arose, were these just random peculiarities, or did they point to a fundamental divide opening up between the authority of the Church and the true loyalty of the order? As the Templars' influence began to permeate every level of European society through their expansion into finance, diplomacy, and massive building projects, their role had evolved far beyond that of mere soldiers. They were now consultants to kings, major property holders, and influential figures who could shape political outcomes. Monarchs were in their debt, business leaders were intimidated by their extensive network, and even the aristocracy vied for their favor. Yet it wasn't the Templars' immense fortune that most disturbed the Vatican, it was their profound dedication to secrecy. Templar chapter meetings were held behind closed doors, governed by rigid rules and unbreakable vows of silence. The initiation ceremonies for new members were clandestine affairs, and certain accounts alleged that initiates were required to spit upon the cross, not as an act of blasphemy, but for some symbolic purpose. Was this merely slander circulated by their rivals, or were these stories built upon misinterpreted kernels of truth? A surviving letter, penned by a papal advisor in the late 1200s, speaks ominously of a storm beneath the stones, cautioning that the Templars were not moving in a direction the Church could endorse. The advisor's words hinted at a design guided not by what was visible, but by some hidden framework. Was he talking about the cryptic symbols the knights etched into stone, or was this a reference to the invisible strategy fueling their incredible ascent? Further evidence surfaced from the Vatican's own archives, describing confiscated Templar books filled with diagrams and strange lettering, all secured in cipher. While the report on these findings strongly suggested placing the white-clad brethren under stricter supervision, no such action was ever taken. This inaction raises a crucial question. What made the Church hesitant to engage in an open confrontation? Could it be that certain factions inside the Vatican were secretly sympathetic to the Templars' mysterious mission? As the atmosphere grew more charged, Pope Boniface VIII did issue quiet orders for closer monitoring of Templar movements, particularly in France and on the Iberian Peninsula. Despite this surveillance, the order itself was still beyond reach. A powerful shield, forged from their widespread popularity among the common folk and their undeniable military value in the Crusades, made them immune to any official decree. And so, the warnings from Rome kept coming, but any real move against them remained stalled. An intriguing theory suggests that some church leaders had no desire to destroy the Templars, but rather to absorb their unique knowledge. Is it possible the Vatican was angling for access to the secrets the knights had unearthed below Jerusalem? If that's the case, then perhaps those letters weren't warnings at all, but carefully veiled invitations to be let into the mystery. It was during this period that an unsigned letter started making the rounds through Italy's monastic communities. Its contents were explosive, accusing the Templars of standing guard over an ancient royal bloodline and orchestrating a great return powerful enough to challenge the very seat of papal authority. The letter's author remained a mystery, but their sophisticated language hinted at an insider with deep knowledge of church politics. Was this a message born of fear, or was it a prophecy? The notion that the Templars were involved in a plan of such massive, transformative scale certainly provides a reason for the Church's mounting anxiety. What if their efforts were focused not on creating a mere army, but on sparking a full-blown philosophical revolution? This movement would aim to supplant established church doctrine with far more ancient truths, wisdom that could be traced back to the court of King Solomon, the star-aligned temples of Egypt, or perhaps even the sacred bloodlines the knights were rumored to have discovered. The dawn of the 14th century brought a dramatic shift in the balance of power. In France, King Philip IV, who owed an astronomical sum to the Templar order, began applying immense pressure on the Vatican to take action. This wasn't merely a political maneuver, it was a move driven by sheer desperation. Philip's predicament, however, provided the Church with the justification it needed to finally move. The entire operation was carefully disguised under the banner of fighting heresy, as accusations were drafted and preparations for arrests were made. Yet this course of action did not have unanimous support. Some bishops simply fell silent, while others chose to flee entirely. Were they perhaps shielding secrets that had been discreetly passed to them from their Templar contacts? If the knights had shared even small fragments of their incredible knowledge, it's conceivable those pieces had taken root deep inside the Church's own command structure. Could this explain why the Pope proceeded with such caution, content to issue warnings while keeping the sword in its sheath? A papal note sent to a French cardinal from this time is chillingly clear. The temple no longer kneels, and what does not kneel must be made to bow. This was not the language of spiritual guidance, it was a declaration of war. Of all the warnings the Church had sent, this may have been the most resounding. The message was unmistakable. Possessing knowledge without official sanction is an act of rebellion. Consequently, anyone protecting such knowledge had to either be assimilated or utterly destroyed. These historical documents cast a long shadow, leaving us with a persistent question. What was the Church's greatest fear? Was it that the Templars were perpetuating a grand deception, or that they were speaking a profound truth? And if their secret was truly dangerous, was the period of quiet that followed meant to shield the public from a shocking reality, or to entomb a discovery that was already beginning to spread? The end came suddenly, in the pre-dawn hours of Friday, October 13, 1307. All across the Kingdom of France, armored soldiers smashed through doors, their torches cutting through the darkness as they raided Templar monasteries, farms, and formidable strongholds. Utterly blindsided, the men who had once been celebrated as Europe's most dependable protectors were caught completely off guard. Some were violently pulled from their beds, while others were apprehended in the middle of their morning prayers. That morning saw the arrest of hundreds of knights, an operation executed on the orders of King Philip IV and sanctioned by Pope Clement V. Heresy was the official charge leveled against them. But this single word served as a mask for more potent motivators: control, debt, and fear. According to the official narrative, the Templars had betrayed the Church by engaging in sinister rituals, showing contempt for the crucifix, and even worshipping strange idols. Yet, investigators never discovered a single idol. No two accounts from the accused were ever the same. The torture chambers produced only a chaotic mess of contradictory stories. Through it all, the Templars' most significant secrets remained securely locked away. This begs the question of what the Crown and the Church were truly hoping to find. Was this a genuine attempt at moral purification, or was it a frantic search for the prize the Templars had carried back from Jerusalem all those years ago? King Philip's financial situation was dire. He owed the Templars a massive sum, and his own treasury was bare. In stark contrast, the knights were rich, impeccably organized, and widely admired. A single, decisive strike allowed him to eliminate a political rival and confiscate their immense wealth. In private, rumors circulated about secret vaults the king's men couldn't locate, about priceless scrolls that had disappeared into thin air, and about important names that were never recorded. Even in the face of horrific interrogations, a great number of knights refused to break. While some did confess under duress, they quickly recanted their statements once the torture ceased. Many others chose to die in silence, taking the secrets they had sworn an oath to protect to their graves. Could their incredible resilience stem from the fact that their true treasure wasn't gold or relics at all, but a body of knowledge purposefully scattered across the continent, hidden within symbols, and buried in places that could never be forced to talk? If this theory holds true, one must ask, what kind of information is worth making the ultimate sacrifice for? Certain historical accounts mention records being spirited away in the days leading up to the arrests. These documents were allegedly carried to safety by prescient Templars, who, sensing the coming storm, escaped to places like Scotland, Portugal, or secluded regions of France. Other stories tell of tunnels deep beneath Templar commanderies that were sealed off and have never been rediscovered. Is it possible that those hidden chambers contain the very scrolls from King Solomon's court, records of a sacred bloodline, diagrams of divine geometry, or even the foundational texts that gave birth to the legends of the Holy Grail? The part played by Pope Clement V in this great betrayal is still shrouded in mystery. He was indebted to King Philip for his papacy and had faced years of pressure to move against the order. Yet, despite giving his approval for the arrests, he seemed reluctant to issue a final, decisive judgment. Correspondence exchanged between high-ranking church officials hints that the Pope was worried about what might be publicly revealed if the trials became a prolonged affair. What information was he privy to? And what was his motivation for later attempting to dissolve the order quietly, as though he wanted the entire issue to disappear without causing any more controversy? A number of recurring themes became apparent as the trials unfolded. The accused Templars were consistently interrogated about specific practices, like kissing one another as part of their ceremonies. They were asked about strange words they supposedly uttered in foreign languages, and about a mysterious head-shaped idol they called Baphomet, an idol that no two men could describe in the same way. Were these genuine Templar customs, or were they merely terrifying fantasies extracted through torture? While the world debated the truth behind the Templars' alleged crimes, a more profound action was already underway, suggesting the arrests were never about discovery, but about concealment. The entire operation, the sudden accusations, the destroyed records, and the Grand Master's execution, can be viewed not as an investigation, but as a systematic campaign to erase a history deemed too powerful for the world to know. This official narrative baffled the public. On that fateful Friday, citizens watched as men they knew as defenders of the innocent, builders of hospitals, and providers for the poor were paraded through the streets as heretics. This stark inconsistency lingered over Europe for generations, a question mark that was never fully resolved, allowing the Templar mystery to deepen. 14 years after the initial raids, on March 18th, the Order's last Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, faced his end, burned alive on an island in the Seine. With his final breaths, he didn't beg for mercy but issued a defiant summons, calling both the Pope and the King to face God's judgment alongside him. In less than a year, both powerful men were dead. Was this a mere twist of fate, or was it evidence that the Templars answered to a higher, more ancient authority that delivered its own form of justice? Many believed de Molay's death was not a conclusion but a catalyst, scattering the Order's surviving members like seeds in the wind. These fugitives found sanctuary in places beyond the Church's influence, receiving welcome from Scottish clans or reorganizing in Portugal under a new identity. With them, they carried the remnants of their order, its symbols, its oral histories, its encoded wisdom, and its secret maps. This raises a compelling question. What if the Templars' greatest treasure was never gold meant for a vault, but a living idea, safeguarded through unwavering discipline, ancient ritual, and profound silence? Even as the French crown seized Templar towers and imprisoned its brothers, the core of what they protected had already escaped, secured in the geometry of stone and hidden within the lines of stories waiting to be retold. The purge of Friday the 13th ultimately failed to destroy the Templars. It simply forced them into the shadows, from which their legend would grow exponentially. But the most audacious move happened just before the trap was sprung. In the days leading up to that infamous October morning, the Templars executed an act of defiance that neither the Church nor the King had anticipated. A significant portion of their fleet, loaded with unknown cargo, slipped out of the port of La Rochelle and sailed into oblivion. There were no official records, no declared destinations, just a collection of ships with full sails and laden hulls that disappeared, leaving behind a silence that has intrigued historians ever since. The contents of those ships remain a source of intense speculation. Dockworkers later recalled strange activity in the dead of night, with cloaked figures loading crates under the watchful eyes of the Templar Knights themselves. Some witnesses claimed the boxes were extraordinarily heavy, while others noted they were handled with a reverence usually reserved for sacred relics. Whispers circulated that ancient, brittle scrolls, bound with unrecognizable seals, were part of the cargo. Could these have been the very documents the Order was said to have unearthed beneath Solomon's Temple, containing lost genealogies, detailed maps, or texts that challenge biblical history? If so, their destination and the identity of those waiting to receive them are among history's greatest secrets. The fleet's disappearance was absolute. Records in La Rochelle stopped cold, as if their final entries were deliberately purged. By the time French authorities arrived, the docks were deserted and the warehouses had been emptied. No one was ever prosecuted for aiding the escape, and not a single ship was ever found. One theory suggests the fleet headed for the British Isles, perhaps finding refuge with allied clans on the remote coasts of Scotland. Another posits they sailed for Portugal, where the Order was later reborn. But a more daring hypothesis suggests at least one ship crossed the Atlantic, arriving in the Americas long before Columbus. This theory seeks to explain puzzling anomalies, such as Native American carvings that bear a striking resemblance to Templar crosses and the discovery of a stone with a Templar emblem buried in Nova Scotia. Was this all a coincidence, or was it evidence of a planned escape route, designed to move a priceless legacy far beyond the reach of its enemies? Other accounts hint that the cargo was more than just documents. A letter, found years later, mentions a sealed chest made of glass and ash, so important that its 3 Templar guardians never left its side, not even to sleep. What could possibly warrant such relentless protection? Perhaps it was a relic from the First Temple, something that could validate the Sacred Bloodline theory or reveal cosmic geometries from creation itself. An even more profound theory suggests the most precious cargo was human. Scholars, children, or even the descendants of a holy lineage, spirited away in the darkness to ensure the survival of the bloodline the Templars had sworn to protect. If that's true, the entire operation transforms from a desperate escape into a strategic relocation of a living secret, preparing for a day when it could safely reemerge. What if ancient tales of knights sailing with a secret cargo are not just metaphors but faint recollections of this very event? The evidence points toward a meticulously planned operation, not a chaotic flight. The Templars' movements were deliberate and coordinated. Just as the arrests were synchronized across Europe, so too were the escapes, implying that warnings had been dispatched well ahead of time. This raises the possibility of a specialized inner circle within the Order, a group whose sole mission was to safeguard the knowledge unearthed in Jerusalem. Their objective in choosing the fleet's destination was not to save their own lives, but to preserve the priceless cargo they carried. Despite ransacking Templar strongholds, breaking into vaults, and torturing knights into giving false confessions, church authorities never found the fleet's contents. No knight could reveal the location of the scrolls for one simple reason: they were already far away. Is it possible that the very information transported on those ships is what later surfaced in the iconography of secret societies, the design of great cathedrals, and encoded manuscripts that still baffle historians? The real treasure aboard the fleet might not have been precious metals or gems, but the preservation of an unbroken chain of ancient wisdom. This teaching, which started in long-forgotten courts and was transcribed by Solomon's own scribes, was protected by the Templars and then sailed away from the church, disappearing over the horizon. Later Masonic texts reference brothers who crossed the deep waters bearing the flame, a poetic line that could very well be a literal description of this exodus. Could a sacred fire, first lit deep beneath the Temple Mount, have endured the Inquisition not in static books or buildings, but in motion? If this is true, the vanishing fleet represents the Templars' greatest covert success, a secret that was not lost to time but strategically relocated. No matter their final destination, be it the quiet shores of Scotland, the foggy coasts of the Americas, or hidden Iberian coves, the ships delivered not only artifacts but the very foundation for a much grander plan, one that may still be unfolding today. Perhaps the Templars' pursuers were doomed to fail from the start, not because the knights were fast runners, but because the core of their legacy was already at sea. Once the dust settled and the dungeons were full, the world assumed the Templar order was extinct. Yet, in the absence of official records, a hidden movement began to stir. A number of brothers, forewarned by quiet signals, evaded the mass arrests on that fateful Friday. This was a select group of specialists: engineers, cartographers, scribes, and custodians of the Order's most ancient secrets. Legend claims these survivors possessed an extraordinary map, one that didn't depict roads or coastlines, but was instead charted using constellations, sacred geometry, and the precise ratios of Solomon's temple. Its purpose was not to locate treasure, but to guide the reconstruction of something profound. Folklore from France and Spain tells of clandestine moonlit gatherings where cloaked figures consulted scrolls filled with strange symbols and geometric angles. Oral history suggests these charts measured significance as much as they measured distance, aligning blueprints for temples with celestial bodies. This implies a belief that specific locations on Earth were intended to mirror cosmic formations, and the Templars were either searching for such a place or trying to create a new one. A rare manuscript from a suppressed monastery in Aragon mentions travelers of the temple who followed the House of Orion and measured from the base of wisdom, phrases that echo star charts and the layout of Solomon's temple. Were they searching for a location linked to the original divine plan, a place where heaven and earth could connect once more? In places like Scotland and Portugal, where they found refuge, surviving Templars started erecting structures with extraordinary mathematical accuracy. New chapels began to emerge, their architectural layouts mirroring the biblical specifications of Solomon's temple and oriented toward specific stars visible only at certain times of the year. What was the purpose of such intricate, hidden geometry? Perhaps the map was a guide not only for where asterisk to build, but also for when. Across Europe, a distinct set of symbols, eight-pointed stars, interlocking circles, keyhole shapes, started appearing in stonework, and they were far from random. Some of these symbols correspond to ancient Babylonian celestial charts, while others replicate ratios discovered within Egyptian temple architecture. The question is, where did the Templars acquire this knowledge? The most likely source is the very scrolls they rescued from Jerusalem, texts far older than Scripture, safeguarded for centuries. It's theorized that these survivors possessed an understanding lost to the Church, that true sacredness is connected to celestial alignment, vibrational resonance, and geographic placement. This might explain why the map was protected at all costs. Its value was not in hiding a treasure, but in completing a cosmic blueprint. A prominent theory links this entire concept directly to Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland. Constructed well after the Templars' fall, its very pillars are thought to represent Jachin and Bose, the two iconic pillars of Solomon's Temple. Many researchers now suspect the chapel's design encodes something far beyond Scripture, an ancient system of knowledge based on sound and vibration. This concept of encoding knowledge into a physical place, one based on sound and vibration, may have its ultimate expression just outside Edinburgh. There, in the quiet Scottish hills, stands Rosslyn Chapel. Built in the mid-15th century, it has the look of a church but the feel of something else entirely. Every surface is alive with symbols and carved secrets. Angels play instruments never seen before, while flowers bloom from pillars touching no soil. For over 500 years, its patterns, codes, and geometry have defied explanation. Many believe this chapel holds the last echo of the vanished Templar order. Could Rosslyn be the final statement of their knowledge, hidden in plain sight? If so, what message were they trying to send through silent math and sculpted stone? The chapel's commission came from Sir William Sinclair, a nobleman with blood ties to Scottish Templars and rumored connections to Freemasonry. This background leads historians to a central question. How could one man design a place so rich in symbolism, so accurate in its astronomical alignments, and so steeped in mysteries far older than Christianity? A compelling theory suggests Sinclair didn't invent the design, but inherited it. The blueprints may have been passed down from Templars who escaped the 14th century arrests, survivors who carried not just relics, but an entire system of sacred knowledge. Could this knowledge have originated in Solomon's Temple, transmitted through secret scrolls, and preserved by generations of builders who used stone as their scripture? Rosslyn's layout contains features that mirror descriptions of Solomon's Temple from ancient Hebrew texts. The two great pillars inside the chapel bear an uncanny resemblance to Jachin and Bose, the legendary columns that flank the entrance to Solomon's sanctuary. Between them lies a raised area marked by an ornate cube, a layout seen not just in biblical descriptions, but in early Templar constructions across Europe. Was this a coincidence? Or was it a deliberate attempt to recreate the holy space in a location safe from the church's reach? The symbolism inside Rosslyn only deepens the mystery. Over 100 green men, faces of pagan nature spirits, peek from the stonework in a motif rarely seen in Christian chapels. Musical cubes line the arches, their placements believed by some to form a harmonic code, with claims that the spacing between carvings matches soundwave patterns when mapped. Could the chapel have been designed not just to resemble Solomon's Temple, but to sing like it? Some ancient texts suggest the original structure resonated with sound during certain rituals. It's possible the Templars preserved that idea, encoding it into Rosslyn's hidden acoustics, begging the question, what sound were they hoping to recreate? Perhaps the most intriguing clue lies in the apprentice pillar, a spiraling stone column covered in vines, dragons, and ancient motifs that is unlike anything else in the chapel. Some say it represents the tree of life, others claim it mirrors a DNA helix, but carved around its base are designs resembling early maps, star alignments, and cube-shaped grids. Could this pillar be more than art? It might be a marker, something that points to where the knowledge was stored or how it could be activated. One theory holds that the Templars who escaped to Scotland brought scrolls not just from Solomon's temple, but from Babylon and the Levant, records of architectural principles meant to preserve harmony between heaven and earth. If Rosslyn is the result of those scrolls, then every carving is part of a larger code, a code that doesn't just tell a story, but enacts one. This grand design, however, may not have been confined to a single Scottish chapel. Across Europe, an explosion of construction began, giving rise to the great Gothic cathedrals. These architectural titans, with foundations seemingly rooted in secrets and spires that pierced the heavens, all materialized within a remarkably short span of a few centuries. Many of them display a mastery of engineering and esoteric knowledge that was centuries ahead of its time. Stone giants like Chartres and Notre Dame were clearly more than just churches. They were intricate messages carved in silence. This begs the question, was a blueprint brought back from the East by Templars who had explored the ruins of Solomon's temple hidden within their very layout? If so, what information were they so desperate to preserve? Take Chartres Cathedral, a stunning case study in this mystery. It was constructed without any nearby stone quarry, and no original plans for its creation have ever been found. More remarkably, its structural ratios are a perfect match for those described in ancient Hebrew texts and also found in Egyptian temples. A huge labyrinth is embedded in its floor, its winding spiral path believed to trace the orbits of celestial bodies. The very presence of such a feature in a Christian church is baffling, especially since its center aligns perfectly with the sunset on the equinox. Many believe the key to this puzzle lies in viewing geometry not merely as a construction method, but as a holy language. The anonymous builders of these cathedrals consistently employed ratios connected to the golden mean. These are the same divine proportions observable in the spirals of a sunflower, the structure of distant galaxies, and even human DNA. This could point to a profound understanding that aimed to create harmony between the physical world and the divine, a kind of architectural music inherited from ancient wisdom. One compelling theory suggests that when the Templars emerged from the Temple Mount's sealed chambers, they carried back not just artifacts, but fundamental principles of cosmic design. With uncanny precision, these principles began to manifest in cathedrals throughout France, Spain, and England. We see floor plans that mimic the sacred patterns of mandalas and vaulted ceilings that amplify the resonance of sung prayer. We see light from stained glass windows engineered to align with zodiacal constellations, but only during specific times of the year. Were these simply beautiful artistic flourishes, or were they intentional triggers designed to awaken a deeper level of human consciousness? Another striking detail emerges when you consider the placement of these cathedrals along ancient pilgrimage routes. If you map them, the churches frequently form alignments that mirror constellations, reflecting patterns first recorded in Babylonian star charts. This leads to a stunning possibility. What if the cathedrals were not just houses of worship, but nodes in a sacred grid, powerful stations built to channel energy across the land? This idea, called the Earth Grid hypothesis, posits that ancient builders, including those connected to Solomon's temple, knew that certain geographic locations amplify energetic resonance. By strategically placing structures on these lines, they could forge a network of immense spiritual and scientific influence. Could the Gothic cathedrals be the rebirth of this ancient system, operating under a Christian guise while being powered by far older truths? Notre Dame in Paris, celebrated for its breathtaking beauty, hides its secrets in plain view. Its iconic twin towers are a direct reflection of the two pillars of Solomon's temple. The sacred geometry of the Tree of Life is mirrored in its magnificent rose windows. Furthermore, a sequence of significant numbers, 3, 7, and 12, is encoded deep within its design, each number a direct echo of sacred concepts from Pythagorean and Kabbalistic traditions. Is this not proof that the knowledge from Jerusalem was painstakingly embedded into every arch and stone? And if it was, who delivered this information to the builders? The master masons responsible for the cathedrals are largely anonymous figures. It's widely believed they were initiated not just into stonework, but into esoteric philosophies safeguarded by secret guilds possibly established by or with the Knights Templar. Their unique symbols, which can still be found in obscure corners and carvings, are remarkably similar to those seen on early Templar maps and within Rosslyn Chapel. Circles inside squares and keys nestled within stars seem to be instructions left for future generations who knew the language. Beneath some cathedrals, something more than stone foundations is hidden. Old records describe sealed crypts adorned with markings that have no precedent in Christian tradition, containing altars without saints and chambers without crosses. What secrets were they protecting? It's possible these spaces were used for rituals that harkened back to the temple traditions of the ancient world, ceremonies designed to harmonize the human voice with light and location. The acoustics inside these cathedrals provide yet another clue. They were engineered with such phenomenal precision that a single whisper can carry from one end of the massive space to the other, and a single sung note can cause the very stone walls to vibrate in sympathy. Were they built this way just for choir music? Or did the builders possess a deeper understanding of vibration and its powerful effect on human consciousness? Perhaps the combination of sound, space, and geometry was intended to induce states of mind that unlock sacred insights. Some researchers argue these churches were essentially tuning devices, designed to align the mind, body, and spirit through their structure alone. If that is true, then the secrets the Templars brought back were never meant for books. They were built into the very fabric of these buildings, a knowledge to be walked through, felt, and heard, not just read. This might explain why, in later centuries, certain members of the clergy began a systematic effort to alter these buildings, changing their layouts, sealing up chambers, and actively downplaying the importance of their geometry. Was it a campaign to erase the deeper purpose of these structures after the Templars were destroyed? Even now, standing inside Chartres or Reims, visitors often report feeling an unusual presence, a stillness, a weight, a silent hum that architecture alone cannot explain. Perhaps it is the lingering echo of a sacred knowledge, passed from the court of Solomon into the hands of the Templars, and finally to the chisel of a French mason. As the timeline stretches back thousands of years, it is easy to feel small against the vastness of history. If you are enjoying this journey through time so far, comment the word ancient so I know you're still with me. That French mason's chisel, however, may have been guided by a legacy that survived long after the last knight fell. The true inheritance of the Templars might not have been their weapons or the secrets they unearthed, but rather the very individuals who quietly vanished after the order's fiery demise. Legends began to circulate about a different kind of fraternity, one that operated from the shadows of power, foregoing armor and war horses. This clandestine group became known as the Priory of Sion. Their mission, conducted while the world remained unaware, was reportedly the protection of a secret so volatile that it commanded the constant attention of monarchs, the Vatican, and other hidden organizations. Could this group have been the true keepers of what the Templars found in Jerusalem? If so, who were they hiding it from, and what explains the complete lack of proof that they ever existed? Initial clues were found in obscure French texts and on tomb engravings that contradicted official historical accounts. Symbols like the rose, the black sun, and a sealed chalice began appearing in highly unusual places like church lintels, private family crests, and forgotten monastic records. Then, in the 20th century, a strange collection of documents known as the Dossier Secrets materialized in the French National Library. These pages contained a shocking list of alleged past grandmasters, including names like Leonardo da Vinci, Botticelli, and Isaac Newton. While most historians dismiss the documents as an elaborate hoax, a closer look revealed a disturbing pattern. The symbols in the dossiers perfectly matched those carved into early Gothic churches, markings used by fleeing Templars, and emblems found in crypts sealed during the Inquisition. Was this an intricately fabricated myth, or was the Priory of Sion a genuine organization, its members hiding in plain sight for centuries? One compelling theory suggests the Priory was formed not after the Templars, but alongside them as a civilian branch. Its purpose was to guard something the Church feared more than any sword or relic: a bloodline. Could the real treasure taken from beneath Solomon's temple have been a genealogy, one that traced a direct line from King David through Jesus of Nazareth and possibly beyond? If true, the Priory's job would not be to fight, but to protect a secret that could shatter the foundations of religion and monarchy. To do this, the Brotherhood might have operated through family lines, silent alliances, and coded communications that only the initiated could ever recognize. Towns in southern France still echo with local stories of unusual families, ones that possessed ancient scrolls passed down through generations, never to be shown or explained. Churches in those same regions feature murals with scenes not found in any gospel, like Mary Magdalene holding a scroll or a chalice shaped more like a womb than a cup. Could these be messages left by the Priory for those who still carried the blood or the knowledge? The hilltop village of Rennes-le-Château became a lightning rod for these theories after its priest, Berenger Saunière, suddenly acquired enormous wealth and began renovating his chapel with bizarre symbols. In place of simple crosses, he installed Hebrew inscriptions, pentagrams, and statues of Magdalene. The source of his money remains unknown, as does his motive for building a secret underground chamber beneath the altar. Some say he found a coded document, possibly linked to the Templars or the Priory, which revealed not gold but a world-altering truth. This raises the possibility that the village was a secret relay point, where Templar knowledge was preserved not by force, but through layers of art, architecture, and silence. Others connect the Priory to the rise of Freemasonry, suggesting that after the Templars fell, their ideas were carried into new groups through ritual and geometry. Could the Masons who built the great cathedrals have also been the bearers of spiritual blueprints handed down from Jerusalem? The layout of Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, the inscriptions in Chartres, and certain compass and square emblems all seem to whisper of a story not yet told. What if the Priory's role was to scatter the pieces of this puzzle across time, waiting for someone to finally collect them again? The most shocking theory tied to the Priory involves not documents or relics, but a living descendant. Some believe the Sacred Bloodline was preserved, protected, and quietly interwoven with European nobility. Could a hidden heir walk among us today, unaware or unwilling to awaken a claim that could redraw history? Or is the bloodline purely symbolic, a spiritual legacy meant to guide humanity through silence and code rather than kingship? The deeper one digs, the more the Priory resembles an immune system for forbidden truth, never attacking, always watching, and quietly ensuring that a flame survives in a world bent on darkness. Their methods were not violent. They used art, music, manuscripts, and architecture to encode the past without setting off any alarms. Some now wonder if even modern movements of thought, from Enlightenment philosophy to civil liberties, carry the fingerprints of this hidden brotherhood. Could their influence still ripple through institutions that appear entirely secular on the surface? In the end, the question remains: was the Priory of Sion a myth designed to inspire? Or was it a very real thread that links Solomon's temple to the cathedrals of Europe, the revolutions of knowledge, and the silent hands that shaped them? If they are still among us, their greatest success is that they've never been truly found, not because they're gone, but because they were never meant to be seen. And what greater secret could such a brotherhood protect than the knowledge contained within a library of sealed manuscripts? Imagine the discovery of a single, unidentifiable page whose style no historian could place, raising the question of whether it was a fragment from the scrolls the Templars unearthed in Jerusalem. Was it a lone survivor, or just one of hundreds that disappeared into private collections as the Knights scattered? A compelling legend from Spain tells of a noble family's archive, which supposedly held a black leather book with mysterious red stains seeping from its edges. This volume defied convention, having no title or page numbers. Instead, it was filled with a bizarre language of symbols, concentric circles, asymmetrical stars and grids that looked more like modern circuit boards than medieval illustrations. A Jesuit theologian who witnessed it before it vanished described it as an entire library speaking with a single voice, claiming that turning its pages felt like stepping into an electrical current. What kind of information could provoke such a powerful reaction from a man of his training? Could the text have been encoded to reawaken something long suppressed or forgotten within the reader? Some researchers propose that these manuscripts were real and were deliberately distributed to prevent anyone in power from hoarding their secrets. They cite curious footnotes in Vatican archives, where popes requested books containing the keys of Solomon, and letters between bishops that mention the red volumes of the temple line. These clues suggest a clandestine network dedicated to preserving forbidden texts across Europe, secretly copying and updating them until a time their full meaning could be safely revealed. The concept of hidden libraries is not new. The mid-20th century discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls proved that ancient societies would hide entire collections in caves to save them from destruction. What if the Templars did the same, but with texts from Jerusalem's most sacred sanctuary? If they exist, their location remains a profound mystery. One trail may lead to Portugal, where Templar castles still stand over landscapes untouched by modern conflict. Another possibility is Switzerland, whose long-standing neutrality and culture of banking secrecy would have made it the ideal refuge for such priceless collections. A third theory suggests some manuscripts were never physically stored at all but hidden in plain sight, coded into frescoes, carved into stone, or even woven into musical compositions, awaiting someone with the key to decode them. The Voynich manuscript, found in the early 1900s, remains a perfect example. This baffling document, written in an unknown script and filled with strange botanical and astronomical drawings, has resisted every attempt at translation. Could it be a Templar text, disguised as nonsense to all but the initiated? Or is it something more profound, a living manuscript that only reveals its secrets under specific conditions, like a certain location or state of mind? A former Rosicrucian once wrote in a private letter that these sealed texts were never lost, only dormant, and that, when the stars return to their gate, the ink will speak again. Was this just poetry, or a literal reference to celestial alignments encoded within the books themselves? Could these manuscripts be activated not by a machine, but spiritually, through geometry, light, or sound resonance? While these ideas seem extraordinary, reflect on the intense secrecy with which monarchs and the Church handled Templar assets. Why would they torture men for years over material wealth they never found? Perhaps what they sought was something that couldn't be taken by force, only understood. The sealed manuscripts might have been unreadable to anyone without specific mathematical, symbolic, or even genetic training. Maybe they contain not just history but instructions, blueprints for harnessing energy, expanding consciousness, or recreating the lost technologies of a much older civilization. A codex that reportedly surfaced in 18th century Prague was said to describe a machine made of wood, crystal, and bronze that needed no fuel, but hummed with power when aligned with specific phases of the moon. After its owner fell ill, he allegedly ordered it destroyed. But what if it was simply passed on, sealed once more, to await the right hands? The idea that ancient knowledge survives in secret libraries is not mere fantasy. Even today, governments and private collectors lock away texts, fearing the power of the information inside. It's entirely possible that among those forbidden books are a few bearing the ink of a Templar scribe, recording something he witnessed beneath the Temple Mount that forever changed his perception of reality. If so, the manuscripts are still with us, waiting not for a crusade, but for a reader who is finally ready to see. It's been said that Solomon's temple was more than a house of worship. It was a map of the universe rendered in stone. Its dimensions, layout, and orientation were believed to mirror the stars themselves, reflecting a design far older than any known religion. But what if it wasn't just sacred architecture? What if it was a coded system, a cosmic formula left behind by a forgotten civilization? And what if, During their 9 years excavating beneath the Temple Mount, the Templars learned how to read it. This possibility has captivated historians and astronomers for centuries. Fragments of the temple's blueprints, found in ancient Jewish and Arabic texts, describe golden ratios, precisely aligned courtyards, and specific distances between chambers that were anything but random. These numbers corresponded to lunar cycles, solstice positions, and even the angle of Orion's belt on the eastern horizon. The temple may have been a colossal celestial calendar, designed to anchor the movements of the heavens into earthly ritual. If the Templars discovered this cosmic alignment, they would have unlocked a revolutionary form of knowledge. Though known as warrior monks, the Templars possessed an unusually advanced understanding of geometry, navigation, and astrology. Upon returning to Europe, they funded the construction of Gothic cathedrals whose rose windows mirrored starbursts and whose floor plans echoed constellations as seen from Jerusalem. How did men with little training in masonry suddenly become master architects of structures that mapped the sky? Some believe that hidden within the temple's foundation was a stellar code, a set of angles and coordinates that taught how to replicate the harmony between heaven and earth. This idea is echoed in the Book of Enoch, a forbidden text that describes a heavenly vault built with divine purpose and design, suggesting the temple was its perfect earthly mirror. This celestial mirroring finds a fascinating echo in a strange diagram, reportedly discovered beneath the abbey at Rennes-le-Château, which depicted a cube encircled by 7 stars in the exact formation of the Pleiades cluster. Etched below it was the classic Hermetic phrase in Latin, "As above, so below." Does this point to a hidden link with Solomon's temple, or is it a map leading to something far greater? It poses the question of whether the Pleiades were the celestial anchor that guided all their later reconstructions. Of course, mapping the stars was a common practice in the ancient world. You had the Egyptians, who precisely aligned their pyramids with the stars Sirius and Orion, and the Babylonians, who diligently tracked the planet Venus to set their ritual calendars. What set Solomon's design apart, however, was its profound fusion of spatial arrangement with spiritual purpose. It was a system engineered not merely to watch the cosmos, but to physically manifest it here on Earth. Some researchers now propose that the temple's innermost sanctuary directly mirrored the celestial sphere. In this model, every chamber was more than just a room. It was a representation of a specific time, a star, or a function within the grand cosmic rhythm. Could the veil that separated the Holy of Holies have been more than just a symbolic divider? What if it was a literal boundary between our known world and a realm mapped out by the stars? And if that's true, is it possible the Templars figured out how to part that veil not with their hands, but through the power of mathematics? Rare and frequently dismissed Templar diagrams offer another clue, showing a peculiar, repeating pattern of circles intersected by triangles, all organized around a single vertical axis. While some interpret this as purely spiritual symbolism, an alternative theory suggests it's a sophisticated form of celestial navigation. This system could use geometry to determine not only one's location on the planet, but also the precise position of the stars in relation to that spot. Was this, perhaps, a prototype for a comprehensive stellar grid? A manuscript from the Renaissance, once in the possession of a known Templar sympathizer, contained a surprising fold-out page. On it, the temple's architectural measurements were meticulously converted into arc degrees, creating a direct link between the structure's layout and the positions of stars on specific dates of the year. Was this simply an attempt to safeguard an ancient method of keeping time? Or was it something more, a functional system for predicting future events by understanding the patterns of celestial alignments, much like how modern astronomers can plot eclipses centuries in advance? The theories grow even more profound when considering the possibility that the Templars believed the original temple was constructed using knowledge from a non-human source, perhaps from a lost antediluvian civilization or even from off-world. Certain texts, discovered in secretive Rosicrucian libraries, speak of the temple's first builder as a being of light. This entity is said to have laid out the temple's geometry to align with star lines connecting Orion, the Pleiades, and Draco. Could this incredible idea have originated from scrolls the Templars unearthed from beneath the mount? Was Solomon's magnificent temple a replica of a structure observed in the heavens or on another world? Or was it built to act as a receiver for something, light, sound, or even a presence, at an exact time and from a precise angle? Others maintain this star-based system was primarily spiritual, not just architectural. They believe that performing rituals within such a space would align the human body and mind with the very rhythms of the universe. Some even argue that the specific chants and music used in the temple served as tuning forks, activating powerful resonant frequencies within the stone walls and the people inside. Could the Templars have been experimenting with this sacred resonance, using it to connect not just with God, but with the fundamental order of the cosmos? If Solomon's temple was truly a reflection of the heavens, and if the Templars managed to recover the keys to understand it, then their true mission was never about protecting pilgrims. It was about reactivating a forgotten science, one that integrated astronomy, sound, and architecture into a unified sacred system. It was a system that could allow humanity to step back into alignment with the stars and just maybe receive a wisdom long lost to time. Whether or not they succeeded, the evidence of their quest remains etched in stone, coded in mathematical ratios, and preserved in blueprints that predate every cathedral they would ever build. This leaves us with a lingering question. Was the temple not just a holy place, but a celestial machine, a monument built not simply to last, but to remember? And if the Templars unlocked its secrets, how many more of their buildings conceal the same geometry of heaven, waiting to be seen not from the ground, but from the stars? This celestial geometry in their cathedrals raises an even more profound question. Were these structures built to discover something new, or to contain a power that had already been unleashed? The concept of such a potent name was far from unique. A deep-seated fear of it resonated across ancient traditions. Islamic lore holds that its true nature was known only to King Solomon and a select few angels. Within Christian mysticism, the earliest texts cautioned against a voice with the power to bend human will, describing specific rituals designed purely to prevent it from ever being spoken aloud. Even Gnostic teachings allude to a primal tone, a vibrational key capable of unlocking the very gates between worlds. Is it possible that all these separate legends trace back to a single, shared truth, a name of such antiquity and might that it had to be scrubbed from every spoken language, while its echo was preserved forever in stone? One compelling theory argues that the Templars went far beyond merely discovering this name. They actively tried to wield it. The secret rituals they conducted in hidden, underground chapels may well have been attempts to summon or control the incredible forces connected to this word of power. In fact, some historians point to certain Templar sites, found mysteriously abandoned or ritually sealed, as grim evidence of experiments that spiraled out of control. Just imagine if they attempted to speak it and failed. Or worse, what if they succeeded? What truly happens when a word of divine origin is uttered by human lips? Could it call forth energies that no mortal could possibly manage? Intriguing accounts from the Templar trials describe bizarre phrases being whispered by knights during their interrogations, sounds that the scribes confessed they were completely unable to transcribe. Perhaps these were faint echoes of the powerful name, slipping out under the immense pressure of torture and striking fear into the hearts of even the most hardened inquisitors. Then again, they could have been deliberate red herrings, designed to conceal a truth far too dangerous to ever be written down. This leads to a fascinating alternative. What if the name was never a word to be spoken at all? Perhaps it was meant to be sung, encoded within sacred chants or specific tones that activated the geometry of their hidden structures. Rosslyn Chapel, with its famous musical cubes and intricate harmonic spacing, might have been precisely such an instrument. Could the name actually be a frequency, a resonance that is felt deep within, not heard with the ears? If so, it's possible that certain sacred sites are still vibrating with that tone today. quietly waiting for the perfect alignment of sound, architecture, and intent to awaken their true purpose. While the idea of a word that can shape reality has become a staple of modern fiction and occult practices, knights and mystics of the past feared it as a tangible threat. If the Templars truly did learn this secret, it would perfectly explain both their meteoric rise in influence and the shockingly swift, merciless campaign that destroyed them. After all, if they had learned to command not just armies, but the very elements and unseen forces, their threat would no longer have been political, it would have been existential. Could it be that the Church's true fear was not heresy, but the terrifying possibility that the Templars had learned to speak with the voice of creation itself, or more frighteningly, to rewrite its code? Today, the location of this name is a complete mystery. Some speculate it was buried alongside the last Grandmaster. Others are convinced it remains hidden in plain sight, encoded in geometry and passed down through ritual, awaiting a time when the world is finally prepared to listen. But the ancient warnings persist. One word spoken at the dawn of time shaped the stars, another could just as easily shatter them. This knowledge came with a terrible price, one detailed in whispers and legends older than Jerusalem's foundations. These stories speak of a divine curse, a protective ward placed upon the secrets of Solomon's temple. It was said that any who disturbed that sacred ground without reverence would suffer not at the hands of men, but from a higher power. By digging beneath the Temple Mount, the Templars may have found far more than treasure. They may have triggered a warning etched into the fabric of fate itself. In the years following their discovery, a pattern of strange misfortune seemed to follow the order. Brilliant architects would vanish without a trace during major construction projects. Entire chapters of Knights were wiped out by sudden, inexplicable illnesses. Fires would mysteriously erupt and consume commanderies that had stood for generations. Were these mere coincidences, or were they signs of a divine judgment for unsealing knowledge meant to remain buried? Ancient texts seem to support the latter. A Hebrew fragment found near the Dead Sea warns that the keepers of the name must never cross the veil, while an Aramaic scroll speaks of a shadow that falls upon those who take from the sacred chamber and speak what was not meant for flesh. Did the Templars find these warnings and ignore them, or did they never see them at all? Following the fall of Jerusalem in the 12th century, the sudden deaths of high-ranking Templar leaders were officially deemed political casualties. Yet, private letters between monks hinted at something darker: bouts of madness, terrifying visions, and knights who had explored beneath the temple descending into a permanent, self-imposed silence. Had exposure to this ancient power shattered their minds? And was this madness a punishment or a terrifying transformation? A chilling story recurs in chronicles from France and Germany, telling of Templars who carried stones from the temple's foundation chambers back to Europe. They believed these relics would protect their strongholds, but the opposite occurred. Once placed within chapels or crypts, the stones were blamed for hauntings, the spontaneous collapse of stone arches, and unexplained deaths during services. Even at Rosslyn Chapel, stonemasons spoke of inexplicable cold spots, of tools vanishing in an instant, and of a palpable presence in the unfinished lower levels that no one dared to face alone. Perhaps the curse didn't need a physical object to travel. What if Solomon's temple was built to align with cosmic forces, and by disturbing its balance, the Templars unleashed a chaotic energy? By replicating its sacred design across Europe in their cathedrals, they might have spread not just divine knowledge, but also a broken, corrupted pattern, one that could dangerously backfire. Some researchers propose that the spectacular fall of the Templars was not a simple act of political betrayal, but the final, devastating act of this curse. In this view, the mass arrests, the horrific tortures, and the burning of Jacques de Molay were not just human cruelty, but a form of divine rebalancing. A 14th-century priest who witnessed de Molay's end wrote that the Grandmaster whispered a final, untranslated phrase. Every person who heard it was dead within weeks. Was it the name? A confession, or a final curse spoken back to its source? In Masonic lore, a concept known as the Builder's Curse warns that those who master sacred geometry without achieving spiritual readiness will suffer a fundamental misalignment of the soul. The Templars may have learned this lesson in the most brutal way imaginable. For all their sacred oaths, the Templars were only human, after all. What if the profound secrets they unearthed left them vulnerable to energies they simply couldn't handle? A seldom-seen manuscript, kept under lock and key in the Vatican's private archives, is said to describe a mark of error that appeared upon the order just before its downfall. Experts wonder if this was a reference to some forbidden doctrine they adopted, or perhaps a physical stigmata visible on the knights themselves, a kind of spiritual blemish that alienated them from God. Another theory suggests their curse wasn't one of fiery destruction, but of absolute silence. Imagine the true agony of the Templars being the possession of a world-altering truth that they were forbidden from ever sharing. To hold a reality so immense and disruptive while being sworn to take it to the grave could be a torment not from a deity, but from the knowledge itself. It begs the question, can a great truth, if mishandled, become a curse upon the one who holds it? Strange tales certainly cropped up across Europe's hidden history. Templar burial sites were discovered desecrated, their iconic symbols defaced, and their names chiseled away from the tombstones. This is not how a cherished memory is preserved. It's how a feared legacy is erased. It's as if later generations desperately tried to break any link to what the knights had found, possibly terrified that the affliction could be transmitted through bloodline, reputation, or even a passing thought. While divine retribution might seem like ancient folklore to us now, even contemporary groups inspired by the Templars, who delve into their codes and rites, talk quietly about avoiding a repeat of the breach. Is this an ancient warning, passed down through the centuries, advising seekers of similar power to first understand its price? If a curse did befall the Templars, its resonance might not be found in a clap of thunder, but in the soft click of a closing door, the unexpected collapse of a dynasty, or the sudden disappearance of people who were too inquisitive. Whether this was a genuine curse or simply the universe correcting an imbalance, the lesson remains potent. Some riches should stay buried, and certain truths, once brought to light, refuse to release their grip. Well before Columbus ever dreamed of his voyage, a different story was being etched in stone across the Atlantic, a story not of conquest and commerce, but of stealth and survival. Researchers have identified markings deep in the Americas that predate European settlement, yet they strangely mirror Templar iconography: stars, keys, compasses, and circles. These weren't random doodles. They were intricate codes, with some carvings angled to align with the solstices and others laid out to reflect the floor plan of Solomon's temple. This has led to an incredible, if controversial, idea that Templar knights fleeing persecution in France journeyed past Scotland and across the vast ocean to a continent hidden from the Pope's reach. While mainstream history rejects this notion, the evidence is stubborn. In West Virginia, the Bat Creek stone features inscriptions that look remarkably like ancient Semitic script. Far to the south in Brazil, crumbling towers and stone crosses have a baffling similarity to medieval European designs. Meanwhile, certain Native American oral histories in the Northeast tell of fair-skinned visitors who came ashore quietly, carrying mysterious books and tools along with a message nobody could decipher. Are these fragmented stories the echoes of Templar refugees, transporting a holy relic across the ocean that was simply too perilous to abandon? What if their guide wasn't just the stars, but something far more ancient? Some theorists propose the Templars had access to maps copied from scrolls found beneath Solomon's temple, charts that depicted not just land and sea, but the planet's unseen energy currents, often called ley lines or star paths. These extraordinary maps supposedly showed them where to construct their buildings by revealing locations where the Earth was in perfect harmony with the cosmos. The Americas could have been the ideal blank slate for them to continue their sacred work in secret. Consider the mysterious stone tower in Newport, Rhode Island, whose creation is a historical puzzle. Officially, it's a colonial mill, but its design, a circular structure with strategically placed windows, is strikingly similar to Templar round churches, earning it the nickname the Templar Tower. Then there's Nova Scotia's Oak Island, famous for its legends of buried treasure. Yet excavations have yielded more than just pirate loot. They've unearthed precisely layered wooden platforms deep underground, triangular stone formations, and inscriptions in languages like ancient Coptic and Hebrew. Perhaps the island was never a bank for gold, but a vault for sacred knowledge spirited away from Europe. This trail of architectural breadcrumbs seems to stretch even further south. A cathedral in Mexico, erected over an ancient native temple, displays geometric designs identical to the sacred geometry used in the earliest Templar buildings. In Peru, you can find caves carved into the shape of a cross, mirroring the layout of the Knights' subterranean chambers. While it's easy to dismiss these as mere coincidence, what if these are the quiet footprints left by a secret migration of guardians and builders, meticulously choosing remote locations to protect a legacy born from Solomon's secrets? These structures might have been intended as beacons, signaling to future initiates who knew how to read the code. But how could they have navigated so precisely? A fascinating theory posits that their transatlantic journeys were directed by a technology far beyond a simple magnetic compass. This device, supposedly constructed from principles found in Solomon's temple, could allegedly sense the Earth's energy patterns and magnetic hotspots, guiding them to places of immense power. While no such artifact has ever been found, cryptic references in Templar texts speak of a needle that bows only to God, and a stone that hums when the land is right. Was this just flowery language, or was it a clever description of a lost technology? It suggests the survivors didn't land by chance, but arrived with a clear intention, selecting sites that vibrated with the very same energies they had once harnessed. This guarded knowledge might just be the key to a belief long cherished by certain Freemasons, who claim their first American lodges were erected based on secret blueprints originating with the Templars. Their archives speak of a builder's line, a conceptual path charted from east to west that supposedly connected the old world to the new through an aligned chain of cities and lodges. Was this a literal set of locations, or does it describe a spiritual legacy passed down through generations? And could its true starting point have been not in Europe, but deep beneath the Temple Mount, with the primordial geometry of Solomon's sanctuary? While these notions are considered speculative today, the symbols themselves are undeniably real. The carvings are still visible, the architecture remains standing, and the stories preserved by stonemasons, native tribes, and clandestine orders all point toward a truth too intricate to be easily dismissed. Perhaps the New World represented more than just new territory. Maybe it was a repository for ancient truths. Was this land selected not for domination, but for preservation? It could have been a haven where profound knowledge, finally liberated from the control of popes and kings, could lie dormant until the world was ready for its reawakening. As we follow these dispersed clues, from stone towers to hidden vaults, from inscribed stars to compass markings, the mystery only deepens. Did the Knights Templar truly fade into legend, or did they merely journey into obscurity, leaving a trail for those with the patience to listen? Among all the enigmas connected to Solomon's temple, a single, radical idea eclipses the rest. It proposes that the true treasure wasn't gold, sacred relics, or a royal bloodline, but the very structure of the temple itself. It was conceived not as a place, but as a pattern, a divine code etched into its dimensions and walls, intended to be experienced as a frequency rather than read like a book. Ancient texts portray the temple as something far beyond a house of worship. They call it a machine for cosmic alignment. The layout, materials, and proportions were all said to perfectly reflect the deepest structures of the universe. Could Solomon's architects have genuinely encoded universal truths about space, sound, and human consciousness directly into stone? And if they did, is it possible the Templars unearthed this blueprint during their excavations beneath the Temple Mount? The earliest biblical accounts offer more than simple construction details, providing precise cubits, angles, and golden ratios in placements of astonishing symmetry. When researchers overlay these measurements onto known geometric forms, they discover perfect alignments with patterns like the flower of life and the golden mean, forms central to sacred geometry. This begs the question, Were these designs purely for aesthetic beauty, or were they functional? Was the temple engineered to channel, or even unlock a form of energy? Much like megalithic sites such as Stonehenge or the Great Pyramids, which appear to interact with natural energies, the temple's original floor plan may have aligned with more than just celestial events. Some theorists propose it was tuned to human brainwave frequencies and acoustic harmonics. Old Hebrew texts even contain references to sound moving through the temple's stone, like wind through trees, suggesting the architecture itself was a conduit for vibrations. Could specific rituals performed inside have been powerfully amplified by the chamber's geometry? And could the resulting frequencies have triggered altered states of consciousness, opening the door to visions, profound insight, and heightened awareness? If this were true, the temple was not merely a house for God, it was a map showing how to find him. As warrior monks, the Templars would have been uniquely positioned to recognize these signs. Their journeys exposed them to Islamic architecture, rich with mathematical symbolism, to Hebrew texts filled with sacred measurements, and to Greek philosophy on divine proportions. It is said that after their time in Jerusalem, the very nature of their own buildings transformed. They began erecting round churches, complex labyrinthine cathedrals, and spiral staircases across their commanderies, with some structures perfectly matching the ratios found in Solomon's temple. Could this have been their method of preserving what they found, by recreating it in stone for future generations? One compelling theory suggests they uncovered a secret ratio embedded within the temple's design, a ratio still not fully understood today, but one that appears in biology, the physics of light, and even atomic structures. Sometimes called the divine scale, its presence has been identified in the spatial arrangement of Rosslyn Chapel, the layout of Chartres Cathedral, and even the elegant curves of the DNA double helix. Does this code represent a universal constant, a hidden mathematical language that connects the human body to the stars and consciousness itself? And if so, were the temple's original builders aware of it? In France, a peculiar carving depicts a Templar knight kneeling within a triangle that is itself encased in concentric circles. While some interpret it as a diagram for meditation, others believe it's a technical blueprint. When its exact measurements are translated, they yield a numerical sequence that appears in modern quantum equations and studies of soundwave patterns. Is this proof that the Templars preserved not just relics, but a form of advanced science? If knowledge can be encoded into shapes and ratios, could those same codes still be activated today? Modern physics explores the principle of resonance, the idea that objects and even minds can synchronize with particular frequencies. The temple may have been engineered to create resonance with the Earth's magnetic field, the human nervous system, or perhaps the very fabric of spacetime. In this sense, it would have served as a bridge, a place where heaven and earth were tuned to the exact same note. Could this be the true nature of the Holy Grail, not a physical cup, but a transcendent state of being, unlocked through sacred architecture? Whispers persist that this is the real reason the Vatican has worked to suppress Templar knowledge. If humanity discovered that geometry could alter awareness and that buildings could awaken spiritual insight, faith would no longer be confined to books and altars. It would become a tangible experience you could physically enter and feel. A scroll discovered in southern Italy, believed to be of Templar origin, describes the shape that opens, a diagram of interlocking triangles and circles meant to be constructed from stone. Scholars are divided on whether it was an early cathedral plan or something more, a code for unlocking memory, energy, or even perception of time. There are modern reports of people experiencing strange sensations, lightheadedness, intense clarity, or emotional overwhelm when standing in the precise geometric centers of Templar-influenced cathedrals during an equinox. Are these merely curious side effects, or are they the intended experiences? If the Templars truly learned that Solomon's temple was a gateway, then they may have embarked on a centuries-long mission to reconstruct it, with a purpose far beyond worship. They intended to activate it. It's possible this wasn't just a single attempt, but a series of successes repeated over and over. Throughout the European continent, countless cathedrals, chapels, and towers display subtle clues of this grand design, incorporating golden ratios, flawless symmetry, alignments with the sun's path, and unique spiral acoustics. What if this vast collection of structures forms an interconnected circuit, a network designed to preserve a forgotten, powerful pattern? If that theory holds, then the real inheritance from Solomon's temple was never buried at all. It has been concealed in plain view, within the very bricks, the resonating echoes, and the silent mathematics that underpins our universe. The official narrative of the Knights Templar seemingly concluded in the early 14th century with the execution of their final grandmaster at the stake. However, the order's resulting silence signified not an ending, but a profound transformation. Their names were purged from historical records, their magnificent buildings were seized or torn down, and their revered symbols were branded as heretical. And yet, in the quiet corners of history, their influence persisted, not in official documents, but woven into architecture, folklore, and hidden rituals. Could the Templars' true legacy have been secured not by open defiance, but through a silent evolution? As the Church consolidated its authority across Europe, new and curious organizations started to appear. These were craft guilds, brotherhoods of stonemasons, and philosophical societies that all seemed to use a symbolic language far older than their own stated origins. They embraced iconography directly linked to Solomon's temple, the compass and square, the all-seeing eye, and the twin pillars known as jachin and bows. These were not just decorative elements. They were components of a coded system, complete with initiations, degrees of rank, and ceremonies that echoed the ancient knowledge the Templars were rumored to have sworn to protect. Is it possible that the Knights Templar never truly disappeared, but instead merged their identity into the world of builders, concealing their story within the very tools of the trade? For many, the emergence of the Freemasons serves as compelling proof of this theory. While their public history begins much later, their most ancient rites are saturated with references to the temple. Initiates are taken through allegorical journeys of Solomon's original builders, instructed to find enlightenment through order and measure, and bound by oath to protect the secrets of the craft. One of their degrees focuses on a lost word of power, while another speaks of a buried treasure of wisdom that a future generation is destined to recover. What is the origin of these concepts, and why do they align so perfectly with Templar traditions? One popular idea suggests that Templar knights fleeing persecution found refuge within the stonemason guilds of Scotland and France, where secrecy was already a way of life, and integrated their knowledge there. Another theory proposes that specific families, such as the Sinclairs of Rosslyn, functioned as a living bridge, connecting the fading order with this emerging craft. They would have passed on not only their bloodlines, but also the sacred blueprints and rituals that preserved Solomon's geometry, Templar loyalties, and the dream of a sacred society beyond the Church's control. Could this explain the immense importance Freemasons place on Solomon's temple? Perhaps for them, the temple is far more than a mere story. It might be a working model, a powerful metaphor, and a code hiding in plain sight. Even in regions where the Church's authority was seemingly absolute, these symbols managed to surface. Cathedrals constructed by unknown master builders feature perfect geometric proportions, magnificent rose windows that mirror sacred mathematics, and enigmatic carvings of figures holding tools, scrolls, and stars. The creators were more than mere artisans. They were messengers, embedding fragments of a forbidden truth into stone. Meanwhile, the Church, while publicly denouncing Templar heresies, was privately assimilating their legacy by adopting their architectural styles, repurposing their fortresses, and absorbing their legends. Is it possible that, when certain popes wore robes adorned with 8-pointed crosses or constructed palaces on former Templar strongholds, they were not just claiming victory, but subtly acknowledging a power they could never truly extinguish? The mystery only deepens as you trace this trail internationally, into Spain, Portugal, and even the Americas. Symbols associated with the Templars reappear, carved into the walls of old missions, etched onto colonial seals and woven into the fabric of early legal texts. These were no random artistic choices. They followed distinct patterns, passed down like a secret whisper from one generation to the next. Some researchers propose that the Templar legacy was intentionally designed for this kind of survival. Scattered, fragmented, and hidden inside professions and oaths, waiting for the right person to recognize it. Could it be that the builders of subsequent eras, the masons, architects, and philosophers, were all custodians of a fragmented worldview that originated in Solomon's Temple? A system that elegantly combined sacred geometry, divine proportion, and intense spiritual discipline. And if they were, was that system still under construction, not just with stone, but within the hearts and minds of its followers? One curious detail appears time and again: the consistent use of veiled language. Instead of explicitly naming Solomon, old texts refer to the first master. In place of Jerusalem, they speak of the Eastern Light. This form of coded speech is found in early Freemason rituals and Rosicrucian writings. Is this indirect language a clear sign that the core ideas survived but had to remain in the shadows? If so, who were the guardians of the flame? Some hold that within today's secret societies, remnants of authentic Templar rituals are still practiced, not for some grand conspiracy, but for the sake of preservation. They believe that somewhere, in ceremonial chambers and forgotten archives, lie copies of ancient scrolls, detailed diagrams of the temple's layout, and first-hand accounts of what the original knights truly discovered. Perhaps the greatest secret of all is that the knowledge was never lost, it simply changed its name. It's possible that the visionaries who built the great cathedrals, temples, and even nations were all drawing from a hidden source of wisdom, one older than any flag or creed. The Templars may have been struck from the Church's official history, but their legacy endured, carved into stone, sung through symbols, and passed down in silence. From one generation to the next, their legacy was passed down. The story of the Knights Templar wasn't consumed by the flames of their execution. It simply receded into the darkness, awaiting rediscovery by those possessing the right knowledge. Consider a room within Solomon's temple of such immense sanctity that its threshold could be crossed by only a single man just once per year, and only after undergoing intense purification rituals. This chamber, known as the Holy of Holies, was reputed to house the Ark of the Covenant and the tangible presence of the divine itself. Yet, what if this hallowed space guarded more than just articles of faith? Imagine the Templars, in their excavations deep beneath the Temple Mount, finally breaching this time-sealed sanctuary, a space untouched for centuries, and witnessing a truth that shattered their entire worldview. Some theorists propose they discovered nothing at all, while others insist they found far too much. Whispers that carry through ancient Masonic texts, Islamic lore, and apocryphal gospels speak of a pivotal moment. Deep in the darkness, surrounded by stone far older than Jerusalem, the Templars allegedly found not an object, but a truth that was never meant to surface. What could have been so revolutionary? It's possible the Holy of Holies held something other than the Ark, perhaps a crystalline tablet, a sophisticated device, or even a map detailing not geography, but the very origins of humanity. Legends describe a voice that could write, a name that held life, or the fundamental pattern of creation itself seared into gold. Could the Templars have unearthed proof not of God, but of a power that predated our understanding of God? A force so ancient and formidable that it threatened the very foundations of truth the Church had meticulously constructed. According to some accounts, this discovery transformed the earliest knights. They ceased identifying as warriors and instead saw themselves as guardians. Recruitment halted. Construction projects stopped. They remained beneath the temple, their new purpose to study, to record, and to protect. What did they see down there? Could it have been evidence of a civilization that came before Israel, Egypt, or even Sumer? A society that encoded its wisdom not in books, but within architecture and resonant frequencies. And was the Holy of Holies the last surviving vault of this lost civilization? Records from later Templars contain coded references to the center that does not move, and the eye that sees but cannot be seen. These cryptic descriptions hint at a place or an object that could transmit knowledge without words, instantly revealing the true, unvarnished history of mankind. With that revelation came a terrible understanding. Every institution on the surface, every crown, church, and empire, was founded upon a narrative that was fundamentally incomplete. Perhaps this explains the Templars' dramatic shift in behavior, their growing alienation from Rome, and their grand, untraceable movements across continents, erecting cathedrals, establishing banks, and embedding their codes in stone. This may have been their quiet rebellion, born not from greed or heresy, but from a sworn duty to a truth too dangerous to speak aloud. If the Templars did find such a relic or recording, they certainly did not reveal it. Instead, they concealed it. One theory suggests it was spirited away on the Templar fleet that famously disappeared in the early 14th century. Another posits it was reburied far from Jerusalem, hidden within a new structure whose location was known only to initiates. There are persistent rumors of a vault deep beneath Rosslyn Chapel, a sealed chamber in Ethiopia, or even a mountain in North America where the stonework's geometry mirrors the temple's layout. Was the secret moved from holy ground to hollow ground, to be watched over by generations of builders sworn to wait, not to reveal? An even more chilling theory suggests the Templars didn't just find the secret, they activated it. This idea casts the Holy of Holies as a trigger, a beacon, or a threshold, designed to respond to a specific frequency, geometry, or human presence. If this is true, their mission was not merely to guard the past but to prepare for the future. Some believe the final words of Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master, were not a curse but a code containing a date, a cycle, or a signal. Could we be approaching a designated time when this secret is meant to be unveiled, when the grand pattern must finally be completed? Even today, the Vatican maintains sealed archives inaccessible to any scholar. Governments monitor old Templar sites with intense surveillance. Certain architectural blueprints remain classified, hidden behind the excuse of national security. But what if the concern isn't a danger to the public, but a danger to the established order of power? This could be the true reason the Templars were so ruthlessly hunted, erased, and condemned, not for their actions, but for their knowledge. The Holy of Holies was more than a room. It was the central axis of a sacred cosmology, a nexus point connecting heaven, earth, and the forgotten ages that came before. By seeing, touching, or understanding it, the Templars came to possess the one thing all empires dread, a truth too immense to be controlled. And that is the ultimate secret. The temple was not merely a building, it was a message. History, as we know it, was rewritten to protect the powerful, and somewhere, buried in stone or sealed in symbols, the original text still waits to be read, not by kings or priests, but by those with the courage to see. We have reached the edge of the map for tonight. The archives of Mythic Index are closing, but the history remains. If this journey offered you rest or realization, please leave a like before you go. Comment which era or myth you wish to explore in our next session, and subscribe to ensure the library doors are open for you again tomorrow.